Hey everyone, welcome to Unique Ways with Thomas Gerard, an audio podcast. We had a really great guest on today. She's an independent creative executive shaping the future of design at the intersection of brand, culture, and technology. Since founding her San Francisco-based consultancy in 2020, she has brought her expertise to large companies like Airbnb and Dropbox and women-founded ventures such as Chicken and Egg Films and Acora. Please join me in welcoming Rachel Gogel. Welcome.
Thanks, Thomas. It's actually Rachel Gogel. Thanks for
Rachel
having me.
Gogel. Are you ready for 20 questions?
Yeah, let's do it.
Great. Question one. Tell me a little bit more about yourself. What do you do?
So, as you said, my name's Rachel Gogel, and my pronouns are she, her. And I'm an independent design executive based in San Francisco. And I've spent the last 16 years really building creative teams from the ground up at places like GQ, the New York Times, a small studio called Godfrey Daddish Partners. I even had a short stint at Meta's Facebook app many years ago. But since 2020, as you just suggested, I've been designing my career on my own terms, working with everyone from global companies like Airbnb and Dropbox, like you mentioned, to these more women-founded ventures such as Chicken and Egg Films, which, just to expand on what they do, they're a nonprofit championing women and gender expansive documentary filmmakers. And you mentioned Acora, but I'll mention another one. There's a social impact action lab and incubator called Anew that actually is opening, like as we speak, in Manhattan's West Village. I'm also passionate about education and mentorship. I've actually been teaching at California College of the Arts here in the Bay Area and tend to spend about, let's say, 20% of my time supporting cross-disciplinary creatives through various initiatives. And I know you mentioned that I'm an independent design executive. I actually would love to just expand a little bit on this term fractional, since I do a lot of that and talk a lot about that. So I am a solopreneur, and I do often work as a fractional creative leader for different companies. And essentially, what that means is that I come into companies at an executive level for a fraction of the time, so it's in the name fractional, to help them through these transitions. And I tend to build creative teams or guide major brand initiatives. And then so I said it's usually a fraction of the time, but also usually a fraction of the cost. Which leads me to my next point. It's this versatile model that provides immense value, usually both ways. So companies gain executive level expertise without the commitment of full-time compensation packages like, let's say, benefits or equity, while we gain diversity in projects and clients, lots of autonomy to pursue personal interests, and the space to continually learn and grow. And it really offers this flexibility to scale up or down based on project needs and brings objective perspectives to long-standing internal problems. And so some of you may be thinking, well, what's the difference between this and like freelancing? Unlike more traditional freelancing, the emerging leadership model that I lean into a lot really enables more seasoned practitioners to drive more strategic and cultural impact across multiple organizations while also claiming their personal agency, which I recognize is such a privilege, especially right now. And so I'm a really big proponent for this movement. It really has the potential to reshape our industry, proving that there are many paths to success beyond conventional corporate structures. So for me, in terms of what I do and how I think about success, it really manifests as this harmonious blend of consulting, which we just touched on, teaching, which I mentioned. I do a lot of mentoring, I do some speaking, and then a lot of advocacy. So activities that allow me to spread optimism and create impact while also making a living. And I'll close by saying that, obviously, while not all of these activities generate equal revenue or maybe any revenue at all, they allow me to design my time with intention. So really over the years, I feel like I've influenced many exciting projects for my clients as an independent for about 4.5 years now. I've done everything from leading org design efforts. I've shaped employee experiences and culture programs. I've coached design leaders, but I've also designed a lot of book covers or pitch decks or movie posters. I do a lot of advising on new publication launches, and I feel like I get a lot of outreach for brand identity systems and some like web design projects. So yeah, while I'm a trained graphic designer, so if you look me up, it's worth just saying, I'm pretty agnostic to the medium. So I do a lot of different things. I know it's hard to sum up in one really short answer, but figured I would just expand a little bit on all the different things that I do.
Great. I love that. And just a note for the audience, if you guys are interested in cool 2025 episodes, please check out our episode with Liz Danzico. Question two, what's a key piece of knowledge that makes you different?
I loved this question because I would say that as a queer leader in design, I really bring lived experience of what it means to be marginalized in professional spaces. So has made me more attuned to all the subtle ways that exclusion happens, and I would say more committed to creating environments where authentic voices can thrive. And so I've really learned that inclusive practices really don't slow you down. They actually make you more efficient and effective. And by partnering with different companies and kind of jumping around and observing different corporate cultures, I really have observed this and it forces me to really kind of think about it. So I really believe that inclusion isn't just about like the end product, it's about the entire ecosystem. And there's a fundamental difference between designing for everyone and designing with everyone. The former tends to assume that we can anticipate needs from the outside, but the latter really recognizes that the communities we're designing for should be active partners in the process. So in terms of just like a key piece of knowledge that I'm thinking a lot about, no matter what kind of engagement that I'm involved with my clients, or whether I'm in the classroom or even just mentoring people, I feel like this is definitely fundamental to how I move through the world.
Very cool. Question three, why this of all things? Why do you do what you do?
So I feel like if I look back at my career, and even I guess what I'm doing right now with certain clients, I've really always cared about people and processes, which I think is why I found success early in my career, or at least found myself on like a slightly faster track and even getting exposed to people management early on. I have a very operational mindset and love designing how people work, not just focusing on final outputs or like tangible, like designed outputs. And when I realized that I could have more impact as an independent practitioner, helping multiple organizations rather than, let's say, being locked into one system, it really did feel like a natural evolution for me. But honestly, it's also about like justice. The traditional corporate ladder wasn't designed for people like me. And I'm speaking, not just as a queer leader, but even as a woman. So rather than just waiting for permission or a seat at a table, that maybe wasn't built for us in the first place, I decided to go out on my own and build my own room or build my own table. And I really, believe that every successful independent practitioner shows organizations what they stand to lose if they don't adapt to, kind of working with more independent practitioners. Since there's a rise in, other people like me going out on their own, trying to kind of find work and building more, let's say, like flexible working models. And I believe that that's kind of the future in which we're going, especially with the rise of more remote work and different companies, integrating AI and kind of other elements into their workforce. So, yeah, that would be something that I think a lot about, and it's definitely fundamental in terms of why I do what I do.
Perfect. Some people struggle with number four, and the question is, what does your future look like?
Mhm. I would say that I see myself continuing to work at this intersection that you mentioned in my intro. So thinking about, design, culture, and technology, but hopefully with an increasing focus on mentorship, and systemic change. So I mentioned that fractional leadership model earlier, and for me, this is just the beginning in terms of that model gaining recognition in the creative industry, and not just design, but I think across a few other creative industries. And I want to help shape how that evolves. And I think a lot about that. It's also top of mind because I get a lot of outreach from other people who are interested in the fractional model and wanting to talk more about it. From, talking about everything from proposals to money and rates and everything in between. So, I think a lot about that. I would say, as regards to where my future is headed, I'm also excited about the potential of AI in terms of just its possibility in terms of integrating into an independent practitioner's kind of business setup. So I lean into it as a creative thought partner when prompting consciously, of course. So I use Claude specifically, which helps me surface patterns and insights that might otherwise remain hidden. Often it helps trace the threads of my own taste and intuition. If you have never heard of Claude, it's one of Anthropic's tools, and I kind of lean into it a lot. In fact, a New York Times article that was published not too long ago by actually a former colleague of mine, Robert Capps, really highlighted taste, like specifically, as one major area where humans are and will continue to be necessary. And it also suggested that the term designer might actually grow to cover a whole range of jobs in which a person's main function is to actually steer artificial intelligence to create something compelling, like whether that's a product or a service or a process based largely on their taste. So I think about this a lot because in terms of my role, kind of telling AI, what to do really requires having a clear vision for exactly what you want and then being strategic while being able to make bold choices. And I feel like that will continue to be more and more in demand. Really, this idea of like marshaling creative choices to this desired outcome, it's definitely not as easy as it sounds. So AI might be democratizing creative output, but it's definitely not democratizing taste. And in this sea of sameness, I feel like a designer's taste and storytelling chops and like handmade craft skills are going to become even more vital than ever before. So I'm thinking a lot about in terms of my future this type of creative currency, and obviously I'm not alone in that thinking. So with practice, I feel like these emerging technologies can actually become extensions of ourselves that really amplify our creative consciousness. And AI is also really empowering workers at every level, enabling us to be even more entrepreneurial, like even faster, which again, I see that as a plus and as something that you may see a surge in people kind of leaning into entrepreneurial pursuits, which is also exciting to me. But just to close, like beyond some of these digital tools, I'm also enjoying like traveling when possible. I'm like my future doesn't just involve work, I guess. Like playing acoustic guitar again, which I started taking lessons. I had been playing in high school, but I only just picked it back up recently. And then at the core of the way that I live my life now is really focusing on my health and well-being. So ultimately, I really want to continue crafting a business that fits my lifestyle while also making a real difference, kind of unlocking human potential rather than just accumulating wealth. So for me, it's always been about depth of impact rather than breadth of reach, and I hope that I can continue doing that in the future.
Perfect. Number five, we say is unique to this show. The question is, let's talk about location. How does the notion of place play into what you do?
I would say this is really top of mind right now because I am moving at the end of the year back to my hometown. So I grew up in Paris, France. You may not notice I don't really have a strong accent or anything. My parents are originally from the United States, but they moved there before I was born, and then I was born there and was raised there, and I left for college, which is why I came back to the United States and then built my career here in the US, both on the East Coast and the West Coast. But growing up in Paris and then working across major media and tech companies, I feel like it really gave me a unique lens on cultural differences and the importance of diverse viewpoints. So being based in San Francisco now, it really puts me at the epicenter of, the tech and AI boom, which is why I was even talking about tech a moment ago, which of course influences my work in some way because these are I'm immersed in it and people around me are talking about it, and it kind of forces me to think about kind of my own relationship with technology and what it means to me. But the beauty of the fractional model is that the notion of place becomes more fluid. So I can work with a team in New York for 2 days, and then I can pivot to a client in Tokyo, all while remaining and maintaining my San Francisco base. And the pandemic really is what accelerated this. So we've proven that meaningful creative collaboration doesn't require everyone to be in the same physical space. Although I'll admit, having some in-person interactions with my clients once in a while, that definitely always helps. So a hybrid model of working fully customized for that project or moment in time is something that I really believe in. Like no Zoom box can fully replicate the feeling that one gets from in-person collaboration or social connection and belonging. So that said, I think there's something really powerful about choosing your home base intentionally. I started my business here in the Bay, and it definitely influenced how I work. San Francisco keeps me connected to a lot of innovation and forward thinking, which feeds directly into the work that I do with my clients, or even just obviously how I talk about certain things in the classroom, knowing that I have taught, in schools here in California and specifically within programs like the Interaction Design program at CCA and the MBA for Design Strategy program. So clearly, some people who are intentionally moving or choosing to work near Silicon Valley in order to pivot a lot of their careers. So after, let's say 4+ years of experimentation here, I really do look forward to figuring out what my solo consultancy may look like from a new home base. So as I mentioned, I'm moving back in January of 2026 after being in the U.S. for more than 2 decades. And so, like I said, when I left France at 17, I moved to Philadelphia to attend uni back in 2005, and then I started my career in New York. So it will be a big change, but I'm excited to figure it out and see how place continues to influence my work.
Very cool. So six, you're starting from the beginning. What advice do you give your former younger self?
Um, I would probably start talking about money sooner and more transparently, to be honest. I spent a lot of years undervaluing my contributions and being uncomfortable with salary negotiations. I was really young when I started my career, and I was put on a fast track into management roles at a really young age. So the best piece of advice that I received early on, which has stuck with me ever since, was if you're not embarrassed about the amount you're asking for, you're not asking for enough. I'd also tell myself to document everything, like use a time tracker, keep records of outcome, project outcomes, build a data foundation for your worth. And most importantly, don't wait for permission because the power to shape your destiny and faith, I know it sounds a bit cheesy, but it really does belong to you. I really believe that everyone is their own best advocate, no matter if you have like the world's best mentor or role model, but like really you are in charge and the biggest advocate for you. And so you kind of have to lean into that and really take yourself seriously as a designer or as a creative and advocate for yourself. And then finally, I would say, and I did do this, although it wasn't as conscious at the time, but this concept of really investing in relationships and mentorship networks early. So some of my most meaningful opportunities have definitely come through connections that I made many years ago and often in unexpected ways. So, uh, I'm glad that I did that at a young age, but I would definitely keep pushing on that. And for anyone listening, really I know sometimes people think of networking as this very transactional process, but if you change that mentally in your head and think less about it as a transactional process and more as a relationship building uh, uh, process, then I do think that that changes a lot and really can have a big influence in your career. And it's very ongoing. Like it's that process never really stops at any point, whether you get a job or not. And so, yeah, I guess those would be the things that are top of mind.
Great. Seven, what's a day in your life like?
It's beautifully varied, which is exactly what I was seeking when I went independent in 2020. So, for example, I might start the day with a creative workshopping session with currently I'm working with a team at Airbnb on a project within their Marcom org, specifically with the international team. So maybe I'll start my day with that. Maybe then during lunch, I'll pivot to reviewing a portfolio for one of my former CCA students, followed by maybe a quick mentorship call through a platform like ADP List. But whether I'm consulting or prepping for a talk or a class, I do try and fit all that into weekly business hours. So if I zoom out for a second, I typically allocate about 45 to 50% of my time to consulting work. And that means that 15% of it maybe goes to teaching, and then the rest of my time is split between mentoring, speaking, and writing. I mentioned this in the previous answer, but I do use time tracking pretty religiously now. I didn't do that in my first year of going independent, but I have done it ever since. And it's not just for billing, but to really understand how I'm actually spending my energy and my time and whether it aligns with my values. So I track both my billable and non-billable time, and it has given me years of data, which not only informs end of year business recaps that I tend to share publicly on LinkedIn if anyone's interested. I've done that the last several years, like towards the end of the year, but also it allows me to reflect on my business structure. So if I'm able to land a few fractional engagement models per year, it means I get the best parts of leadership, like mentoring, strategic thinking, influence over big bodies of work without necessarily getting or caught up into like internal politics at a company or endless meetings. And that part can be really amazing. So then after work, after hours, you can find me like museum hopping, attending Valkyrie's WNBA basketball games to witness history. I was a season ticket holder this year. There was the inaugural season. It was amazing. I'm a big basketball fan, and I play also. I prioritize my favorite like yoga sculpt workout class. I leave voice notes for my friends. I again like really lean into my well-being. So I go to acupuncture pretty often. So again, like kind of beyond maybe some typical answers from some of your other guests, like where it's maybe just about work, I really try to figure out how to, yes, of course, like figuring out just the right amount of income that supports the lifestyle that I want to lead. But then outside of that, consulting, teaching, speaking, mentoring, writing, like all of these activities that I try to build in during my business hours, then I try to also, again, like figure out how to spend my time outside of work so that it continues to recharge me. That way, it helps me show up even better for my clients and for other projects. So it definitely kind of fuels each other. And what's really nice about being independent is that no day is the same. So I just gave you like a certain day like preview, but really from day to day it can look really different, and that's also why I enjoy it. I like the diversity of how my time is spent, and I honestly the more kind of formulaic way of spending your days like in a 9 to 5 structure at like a corporate full-time job. I know I used to do that for years and years and years, but I don't miss it, and I have been really enjoying designing my own career and my time, and I hope that I'm able to continue doing that as I move to Paris and figure out this next life chapter. So yeah, hoping to manifest that.
Awesome. Number 8, lifelong learning is a popular topic. How do you stay up to date?
I love this question because I think about lifelong learning. Like one of the things that I used to tell myself when I was at a job and thinking about maybe what's next was, I would think about like, am I still learning? Am I growing? And am I being challenged?
Hmm.
And so learning was always at the core of, kind of that question of should I stay or should I go? And what's cool about running my own business now and being my own boss is really thinking about like where does learning show up in my day to day. And of course, I learn a lot when I'm consulting with clients and in the classroom is where I feel like I think teaching is actually my secret weapon for staying current in a lot of ways. Like when you're in front of students, you have to be able to explain not just what's happening now, but why it matters and where it's heading. So I feel like my students, in particular, often introduce me to tools and perspectives or cultural shifts that I might miss otherwise. And teaching really remains a central part of my professional identity and a deeply fulfilling aspect of my practice. Um, at the end of last year, I had developed this new class called Career Design Lab for the Design Strategy MBA program at CCA, which was I was building on my previous curriculum development work, but then tailoring the content to address emerging industry challenges and then kind of adapted that and was able to teach it this spring. I've also facilitated more specialized workshops across multiple CCA programs, but I'm particularly proud of how these workshops became spaces for students across programs at the university. So the DMBA program, MFA, MDes, which is the interaction design program, because I was able to see how students can collaborate across these boundaries, almost mirroring the interdisciplinary nature of today's design practice. I also believe in learning through doing. So, every fractional engagement really exposes me to different industries, challenges, or org cultures, and then ways of working. It's like imagine having multiple laboratories for professional development, and that is how I feel every time I work with a different company. Mentorship, though, I mean, I have to mention that in terms of this concept of lifelong learning. I feel like mentorship can also be another form of teaching, and then learning, obviously, as a result. So it's equally rewarding and it can definitely be a mutually beneficial relationship that leads to this lifelong learning that you're talking about. And many of my mentorship conversations actually revolve around my business model, as I suggested earlier, and this fractional leadership path. I think people are hungry to see alternative routes to success. And, whether it's freelancing or fractional consulting or, there's obviously so many ways to build your own business practice. And when marginalized voices see someone who looks like them or shares their experience building something sustainable and profitable and meaningful, I think it can really shift what they believe is possible. But mentorship isn't just about career advice, right? It's about creating what I've heard referred to as like wisdom circles, these small trusted groups where we can share work in progress and offer honest feedback and discuss the unique challenges that we face. And then I would say lastly, in terms of learning, I do listen to a lot of design podcasts pretty voraciously and generally consume lots of industry publications and design specific content, often on topics like leadership and psychology and cultural criticism. So the patterns that you see across disciplines often reveal insights that maybe you'd miss if you stayed in your own lane. So even beyond just design specific content, I feel like I'm absorbing more kind of cross-disciplinary creative content or kind of reading and or listening. And so all of this, I would say, really form these inputs that help shape how I think and my perspective on where things are headed. And obviously, things are changing pretty rapidly, but it's an ongoing process in terms of this concept of lifelong learning. But I feel like when I'm not learning, something is not right. So if I feel like something is off or that I'm not learning enough, then I tend to try to find ways to continue learning. And I feel really grateful that I have different avenues of learning, because again, while they do shape and like like fuel one another, it forces me to kind of really be constantly learning, and that is something that keeps me energized and excited about like being a designer.
Super. Nine is about tools. Do you use both digital and analog tools?
I am, I would say I'm not, well, so okay, in terms of tools, I would say my core toolkit really does include the usual suspects, like Figma, Notion, Toggle is the time tracking tool that I use. But what's been really transformative recently is incorporating AI, like I said. So like Claude, Perplexity is another one. They help me really surface patterns. They draft initial concepts. They help me think through some complex problems. I also really heavily rely on lots of collaboration tools, like digital collaboration tools such as Slack. That allows me to be more embedded with teams at companies, regardless of my physical location. And the goal is to really feel like a true team member, not an external consultant, even when I'm only there fractionally. For some other engagements, I rely on maybe more conventional communication tools such as email and text to stay in touch with my clients, which and clients who often end up turning into lifelong friends and collaborators, which is why even exchanging, phone numbers and kind of building relationships that way. So really grateful for that. Also, it's worth noting that my career did follow and continues to follow the rise and dominance of an entire era of digital design. So, from building mobile commerce apps for the first generation of the iPhone to navigating how to advertise on the iPad, which I feel like just even saying iPad feels like a dated device, to optimizing content for mobile devices and more. I became a designer post internet and email boom and have had to really navigate new software and technology emerging throughout my entire career. And needless to say, the pandemic has only accelerated digital transformation. So I'll note that I don't see myself as an early adopter of technology or these tools, but I've always been an early observer. I tend to wait a beat for things to settle before figuring out what's worth learning so that I can help my employers or clients navigate these seismic shifts in culture due to emerging technology and innovation. And, it's moving super quickly, like even lately, it feels hard to keep up, but I'd like to remain optimistic about the potential of our industry, especially since those of you tuning in are driving a lot of it and are interested in hopefully using your design skills for good. And in terms of uh, you know, just thinking of this question also from the lens of being, let's say, like a digital nomad, I'm definitely location flexible, as I said earlier. But yeah, so these tools are interesting because it's both so critical in terms of my day-to-day running a business. Then there's the tools that help me be a designer and uh, be kind of stay relevant. I'm still very much someone who rolls up their sleeves, and I am making just as much as leading. And what's been nice about most of the roles that I take on is that I tend to I tend to be attracted to engagements where either a team doesn't exist or it requires like the next evolution of its growth, and it means that something is often kind of broken. So this concept of like a 0 to 1 like building phase, and part of that building phase then implies that I can't just come in to lead. I have to be hands-on in some way. So again, I think because of my draw to these types of gigs, I just tend to find myself understanding or questioning which tools feel important for me in this moment in time and what will help me do this job. And so it's been fun to be able to play and experiment and figure out what works for me. I'll just say lastly before the next question there is something to be said about being based in San Francisco because it's easy to get really overwhelmed by just the amount of tools and technology out there, especially when you're so close to, Silicon Valley, lots of innovation. And honestly, like so many of my friends work on this like software or hardware that people are using all over the world. And so when a lot of these, when you're having conversations and you know where your friends work, and it just feels like it can easily become consuming if you let it happen that way. And so I really try to set certain boundaries and again, like not feel the pressure of buying every new gadget or trying every single thing because that's a bit too much for me. But it does help me at least kind of understand where to lean in and where to lean out. And so I feel grateful for that because I don't need to read the news or the headlines to know what's coming. I can just have conversations or kind of see what some of my friends are working on, and that helps me understand trends. And then I have to then figure out where I want to sit, in terms of where things are headed and what's important to me.
Awesome. Halfway number 10, how do you deal with work-life balance or life-work balance?
Yeah. I would say, I mean, you've heard me already talk about this kind of blend and how I work and how I live, but this I do pretty much reject this concept of work-life balance from a sense that it implies that they're separate entities to be balanced. So I feel like we keep optimizing our time, but forget to replenish ourselves. And other terms that I've come across or heard of are like work-life integration or work-life harmony. And that those share a similar framing that I don't know, how I feel about those. So instead I try to aspire to embrace more of a so instead of this concept of like work life, it's more of a work rest rhythm. So designing a career that really honors the multifaceted nature of who I am. So, since going out on my own in 2020, I've really tried to embrace this cyclical pattern of engaging in work or focused activity and then intentionally taking time for rest and recovery. I don't know. Maybe it's part of me being from Europe and building a business practice that feels maybe like it, I don't know, it's like rooted in like European DNA because I really care about taking time off, just as much as I like find myself getting deep into the work. So it's a concept that really emphasizes the importance of mixing these periods of intense effort with periods of rejuvenation to maintain well-being. For example, like after a recent gig, I took almost 2 months off of work to really truly unplug. And, in order to do that, you have to obviously plan for it, because ideally, if you're unplugged for that long, you're like already planning or figuring out what you're going to do when you do get back online. So it just requires you to like think ahead and plan ahead. And in a way, it's not about choosing between living to work or working to live, but maybe instead approaching my career based on what makes me happy in life and then what I need right now in this moment. So, um, if some of you have seen sometimes on Instagram in the past, I share a lot about my health. But I've been dealing with some chronic health issues for the last 5 years or so, which pretty much like is the same timeline related to when I went out on my own in 2020. And it really reminds me not to take my body or my mind for granted and find ways to commit the right kind of energy to my work and still be able to show up for myself and others. I won't go into details necessarily, but like I had a brain tumor. I had mold in my apartment. I had like a long list of things kind of happened in my life. Um, and it kind of forced me to build a business practice that had health and well-being at the center, which, obviously I wish I didn't get sick to learn that, but the fact that, that was the kind of starting point of how I was building my business practice, which meant that I wasn't saying yes to every client. If anything, I was setting boundaries really early. So, going independent really allows me or allowed me to align my schedule with my natural rhythms and energy. And so if I need to rest, I rest. If I'm in a creative flow, I lean into it. And the key is being really intentional about your choices and honest about your needs. And I also had to learn to be a good boss to myself, right? Like setting boundaries, celebrating wins, and then not falling into the trap of working all the time just because you can. So yeah, that's my own philosophy in terms of the work-life concept.
Great. 11. If you weren't doing what you do now, what might you be doing?
I love this question because it really got me thinking about, I mean, there's obviously things that when you're like a kid and people ask you what your dream job is, uh, but like being asked this question now in this moment in time forced me to think about, what I would probably be doing. And I guess my answer would be either. Like I'd probably be working in like cultural institutions, like maybe running programs at a museum or a foundation that bridges art, technology, and social justice. There's something about this intersection of creativity and cultural impact that really energizes me. And so I obviously do, or I try to do a lot of that as a designer, but if I wasn't doing that, I'd probably be working in a cultural institution and being adjacent to that. Or like kind of out of left field, but honestly, I might be a basketball coach for a women's team. I love the strategic thinking, the team building, the way you have to adapt your approach to each individual while working toward a collective goal. It's not that different from creative leadership in many ways. I mean, obviously, it has very specialized skills, but that would be pretty cool. And like other dream jobs that I've thought about in like an alternate reality would be like being involved in the sound design or scoring of movies and TV, which is probably why I've always loved designing film posters when I can. Or like I guess the last thing I'd say, maybe like I love what designer Annie Atkins and her team does for a lot of the Wes Anderson films. Like they build these entire fictitious worlds through paper props and all kinds of print ephemera. And I know I don't have the skills to do that necessarily, or who knows, maybe I could learn, but that seems like a pretty cool job. And so maybe in another life, that would be something I'd be doing.
Great. And what would you not like to do with your career?
And anything that requires me to compromise my values around inclusion and equity. I mean, I've worked in toxic environments before, and life is too short to spend it in places that don't support people's full humanity. Maybe my health stuff, like I mentioned or alluded to, is like forcing this answer, but I'm really conscious of time on this earth. Like my wife's mom died a few years ago of cancer, and I was around for that too. And just kind of watching even people around me work, or, maybe it's also our age, but starting to take care of their aging parents. And, then there's just our own health and how we're thinking. So, definitely this concept of anyone who would ask me to compromise that. I also wouldn't want to go back, honestly, to a traditional corporate structure where growth is measured purely by headcount or revenue. Like this bigger is better mentality often comes at the expense of quality and sustainability and human well-being. And I'm just watching a lot of my friends be miserable in a lot of these corporate structures right now. I know that there's also the economy and the current administration and so many other things that may be contributing to just the general tone at a lot of these companies right now. But uh, yeah, I guess if possible, like this concept of corporate structure, 9 to 5, like 8 hour days, like, that growth means a certain thing kind of in terms of your career. I just can't see myself fully going back to that. Obviously, it's nice to know that that is maybe always an option in case my current like independent practice slows down, or maybe who knows, maybe I'll change my mind. But at least right now, I really would not like to do that or lean into that, as much as possible.
Great. And do you have a favorite word, quote, or sentence?
Yes, I like in all of my speaking gigs, I always quote a slide. Sorry, I always quote one of my former clients, who is the CEO of a company called Acumen. Her name's Jacqueline Novogratz. And the quote is, what if we measure true success not by the amount of money you have, but by the amount of human energy you unlock, the amount of potential you enable? If that were our metric, our world would be a different place.
Hmm.
And that question has become central to how I approach everything. It's always how I usually close my talks and even bring it in classrooms, etc. I also love the concept of being like a devoted generalist, and I can't take credit for that term. Elizabeth Goodspeed, who's another independent designer and writer, talks about being that and coined that term many years ago. But basically, the concept suggests like someone who shapes their practice through intentional experimentation, letting curiosity guide them towards work that truly energizes them. So yeah, I mean, definitely have a favorite quote. And in terms of just the word, I'm a big fan of, or I guess it's two words, but devoted generalist all the way.
Nice. And do you have a least favorite word, quote, or sentence?
I guess I would say like a maybe like a saying that I hear a lot that I don't like is like I'll just quote, like I'll paraphrase the concept, but companies who say things like that's just how things are done here,
Mhm.
period. I believe that it's the enemy of progress and innovation. Just because something has always been done a certain way doesn't mean it's the best way or that it serves everyone equally. Also, there are two words or terms that are being thrown around more than usual lately that probably need a rebrand. I mentioned this earlier, right? Like the first is networking. The reality is that everyone should be nurturing and fostering their relationships on an ongoing basis. Every conversation can lead to an opportunity, and everyone should just stay open-minded. And so I want to recognize that right now the market is crowded and people are craving genuine connections and support. So it should be about, more than giving, giving more than expecting anything in return. Yeah, I do believe in karma and it would come back around. So really focusing on relationship building and you'll be fine. So I know I'm not saying like networking is my least favorite word, but it definitely needs a rebrand. And then last thing that came up for me with this question was more about, again, like a reframing. Like I'm not enjoying witnessing the acronym DEI. It's being weaponized in many contexts right now in America. So I'd like to also rebrand it or reclaim it. I believe organizations still deeply care about what those words actually represent, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I'd argue that maybe justice should be part of that conversation too. Actually, one of my previous employers, Godfrey Dadich, they used the acronym JEDI, like JEDI, as a term instead of DEI, which I loved, which was justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, because ultimately that's what we're working toward, like a more just and equitable system that includes everyone. And so, yeah, I mean, I definitely have sentences or uh, you know, uh, some common phrases or like the energy that some teams or companies like put out into the universe that I feel like need to stop now. And then there's definitely other words or acronyms or terms that either need a rebrand or need some reframing for us to really lean into progress and get out of our own way.
Great. Okay, you're choosing one word to describe yourself. What word do you choose?
Probably bridge builder. Um, like whether it's connecting different teams within an organization, linking established companies with emerging talent, or helping translate between different disciplines and perspectives. I feel like I seem to naturally gravitate towards creating those connections where they didn't exist before. I'm really grateful for my community of amazing humans, and I really do love helping others get jobs or make new connections that could lead to the next thing that could change their life. So I'm a proud fan of many people from afar, and while I often forget about the small role that I may have played in maybe the dot connecting process, I guess I often think about hoping that I can be remembered by like having impacted at least one person's life for the better. It's definitely about quality over quantity for me. But yeah, I guess bridge builder would be the word that I would give to myself.
Great. And what keeps you up at night?
This Thomas, this question is so loaded. I mean, a few things definitely, like the environmental impact of AI development that not many people are talking about. Although there was a recent article in the Washington Post, I think, or the Wall Street Journal that had this great article about understanding the true environmental impact that AI has and kind of comparing it to other technology, like invisible technologies or things that you're not seeing, like like your use of the internet. The energy consumption really required for training and deployment is obviously massive, yet it's largely hidden from users. I feel like as designers and leaders, we have a responsibility to make those costs more visible. I also worry about the persistent inequities in our industries, especially around gender parity at the leadership level, equal pay, and more. I feel like we've made progress, but it's painfully slow, and there are still so many talented people that, who don't see paths forward for themselves. And I would say in a lot of ways, even just this year, some things feel like they're slowing down even more. Maybe for some obvious reasons that I won't get into, but specifically in the United States. Beyond industry related worries, I worry about the state of the planet, war, politics, the constant threat to the LGBTQ plus community. I worry that too much remote work or really like the speed at which technology is impacting our daily lives is making our humanity even lonelier. Like there's been a lot of papers and research about the loneliness epidemic. Like I really see that and continue to see it. And I still have ongoing health stuff that obviously I wish I didn't have, but all in all, it does make me more conscious of my time on this earth and how I want to spend it. So there's that. So, there are a few things that keep me up at night, and I'm sure many of people tuning in can relate, but hopefully that gets balanced with other things that also get you excited about waking up the next day.
Great. And final stretch here. What's a dream you're chasing?
A lot of this is connected to some of my previous answers, but I want to see the creative industries really become truly inclusive. So, not just in terms of who gets hired, but in terms of whose perspectives shape the work, whose voices are amplified, and whose definitions of success we prioritize. More practically, whether through my speaking or writing or even just through my day-to-day practice, I'm working towards creating sustainable support systems for independent creatives. I feel like we need better models for benefits, professional development, and community building outside traditional employment structures. So the professional landscape is evolving really rapidly, right? This concept of like jobs for life is fading into history, and companies discover they're discovering right now that they can no longer attract top talent with standard employment packages alone. Like the rising independent economy pressures organizations to truly differentiate the full-time experience, whether that's through profit sharing or enhanced career development and regular check-ins about whether current arrangements fit their employees' life stages. And these systemic changes aren't about abandoning conventional structures, but actually reshaping them. And as more creatives forge these independent paths, employers really must examine their cultures, their values, their policies. And I believe that every successful self-employed individual really demonstrates that alternative models aren't just viable, but profitable. If you're involved or if you're reading the news and kind of looking at the trends in the industry. There's obviously a lot of layoffs and shrinking budgets, and traditional roles really no longer offer the security they once did. There's a lot of toxic cultures permeating in workplaces right now, and specifically, it's interesting, like Gen Z and millennials really aren't tolerating what was once routinely accepted as normal. And so, if these companies don't rise to this challenge, they really won't be able to hang on to their employees. But in this upheaval really lies opportunity for systemic change, or at least I believe so. So, when we create better conditions for ourselves, we're really establishing new standards for the entire industry. And the energy that once spent fighting for recognition maybe can get channeled directly into creating impact and pushing for transformation. So I'm calling this era like the era of personal agency, and we each get to define what success looks like for us, regardless of societal expectations or industry norms. And for some, it means building a thriving solo practice, right? Like for me, but for others, it involves like envisioning a larger studio environment or partner lancing or innovating within a classic corporate structure. And for others still, maybe it combines roles and pursuits that don't fit neatly into any pre-existing category. But what's clear is that there's no one size fits all solution. And so that's the dream that I'm chasing is continuing to advocate and push this narrative and really hope that I can make a difference by partnering with organizations like from inside the company, obviously still as an independent, but um, yeah, that's definitely one big dream that I'm chasing.
Perfect. And 18, what inspires you?
I'm really inspired by other women and marginalized voices who've built businesses on their own terms.
Mm.
Every time that someone succeeds outside traditional structures, I feel like they create proof that different approaches are possible. And when we set equitable rates and champion transparency and build these flexible work arrangements, I feel like we pressure mainstream corporations to evolve. And we must continue challenging these workplace biases, like advocating for equal pay and better social protections, expanding funding access, supporting working parents, caregivers, and those suffering silently for a variety of reasons. I honestly, like at my core, I feel like our independence becomes a form of advocacy, and every successful independent practitioner really shows organizations what they stand to lose if they don't adapt. So what continues to inspire me is that, and then the incredible like kindness and generosity that I see among other self-employed creatives, like whether that's trading advice to sharing opportunities, because while we may work for ourselves, we're never alone. And what's often left unsaid is that going independent can actually be really financially empowering too, like especially for women and marginalized creatives who have historically been underpaid in more conventional roles. And by setting our own rates and being transparent about compensation, many of us aren't just making a living, like we're actually thriving. And success isn't necessarily about scaling up, and growth doesn't always mean expansion. I feel like, again, a lot of these concepts feel very American, like in nature. But for many independent creatives, including myself, it means intentionally keeping things really small and intimate. And there's power in being selective, like there's wisdom in recognizing that sometimes less is more, especially in a society that subconsciously breeds burnout. So yeah, what inspires me, definitely many other people that I meet with on an ongoing basis, and just seeing kind of the ongoing proof that success doesn't mean just one thing, and yeah, the kindness and generosity that I mentioned.
Great. And last couple here. Number 19, any advice you'd like to share?
So many, I could talk forever. Let's see. Okay, I would say like stop shrinking to fit into spaces that weren't designed for you. Like take the plunge, start that project, raise your rates. Remember that self-employment doesn't require a lifetime commitment. Maybe it might just suit certain life stages as your career evolves. Please, 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 like talk more about money more openly. Feel like the wage gap really continues to persist, partly because salary information or rate transparency is shrouded in secrecy. By being transparent about compensation, I feel like we create accountability and help each other get paid more equitably. So to my fellow self-identifying like women, non-binary and queer creatives out there, or just people who are living that independent contractor or creative solopreneur life, I really encourage you to share your own stats and learnings. And then, Thomas, I felt like it was a good point to like, there's so many people who ask me questions about fractional leadership. So I thought I would just give some advice to people who are interested specifically in that. So if you want to learn more about fractional design leadership, I would say just be sure to think about four things, and I call them the four C's, so it's easy to remember. The first is craft. So, you can elevate design quality and creative output across multiple brands and touch points, and in each case, maintain unwavering standards while respecting each brand's unique DNA. So the first, again, is craft. The second is collaboration. You get to partner seamlessly with C-suite executives, department heads, and cross-functional teams to align creative vision with business objectives. And you can really help source, interview, and influence hiring decisions too for your full-time replacement, ensuring more sustainable leadership after your departure. So try to develop a reputation for quickly integrating into existing teams and then bridging silos. So that's the second one, collaboration. The third is culture. So you get to strengthen creative cultures at critical inflection points. I personally have discovered that healthy creative cultures aren't accidental, but require really intentional cultivation, especially during periods of change. So that's the third. And then the fourth and final one is coaching. So really leaning into mentorship, skill development, and career guidance across all levels, from interns to other creative directors navigating expanded responsibilities. You can, because you're coming in from the outside and you're not full time, usually that allows you to create these safe spaces and helping develop leadership skills and then support knowledge transfer whenever possible. These moments of connection really often prove most valuable long after my contracts end specifically, and I assume that they would for you too. So these coaching relationships really, maybe they start during your engagement, but they could continue long beyond that. So again, just to close, like the four C's: craft, collaboration, culture, coaching. So a few pieces of advice that are top of mind for me, but I hope that that's helpful.
Perfect. And finally, number 20, how can our listeners keep tabs on you and what's our call to action?
Well, first off, thanks for having me on this podcast. Those were some fun questions. And you can find me at rachelgogel.com, RACHELGOGEL.com, where that's my main website, where I share insights about fractional leadership, industry trends, or career navigation. So if you're ever interested, please reach out there. I'm most active, I would say, on LinkedIn, which is you can find through my website, or my LinkedIn URL is my first and last name. And then I also post on Instagram mostly, not often, honestly, and Threads sometimes at the handle RGOGEL. And then if you're looking for mentorship, I'm on a few different platforms. So ADP List is one, Intro is another one, and the third is called Talk to a Creative Director. You can just Google search those and find me. And then I love just connecting with people who are building their own paths in this industry. So I hope that this was interesting and fun to listen to. And yeah, I hope to hear from you through a few different ways. But thanks again for having me, Thomas.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining. It was a real pleasure to hear you expand on these and talk about your specific path. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Thomas. All right, take care.